Picture this. You are 11,500 feet up in the remote, jagged peaks of the Andes Mountains.
Oh, man. Just the altitude alone is terrifying.
Right. And it is October 13th, 1972. The temperature is plunging toward minus 30 degrees Celsius.
Which is, I mean, that is bone-chilling cold.
Exactly. But you were wearing light street clothes. We're talking a blazer, a polo shirt, maybe a pair of loafers.
Oh, God. No winter gear at all.
None. No winter gear, no survival training whatsoever. And the plane you were just flying in has been violently torn apart.
Wow.
Yeah, leaving you stranded in this desolate landscape of just blinding white snow and rock, entirely cut off from the rest of the world.
It is the absolute, textbook definition of a hostile environment. It's an instant, brutal severing from everything recognizable.
It really is.
You know, you were stripped of the ordinary world of all its safety nets and assumptions in literally a matter of seconds.
And today, we are doing a deep dive into exactly what happens in the aftermath of that severing. We're looking at the story of Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571.
It's such a massive story.
It is. And we have a huge stack of sources in front of us. We've got survivor memoirs, extensive historical accounts, theological and ethical analyses, and even some psychological frameworks.
Lots to get through.
Yeah. I'll be tracking the timeline, the staggering environmental horrors, and just the sheer physical mechanics of how anyone survived this.
And I'll be looking beneath the surface of that timeline. We are going to examine the profound psychological toll this took.
Which was immense.
Immense. And the heavy moral weight of the decisions made on that mountain. Because to truly understand this event, you have to look at how human social structures dissolve and, how entirely new ones are violently forged in their place.
No, I want to be very clear from the jump here. This is not a horror story.
Right. Important distinction.
Yes, the details we will discuss are visceral, and they are terrifying. But we are approaching this as a profound, respectful study of human endurance.
Absolutely.
It's about the biological imperative to stay alive and what actually happens when all the structures of modern life just vanish.
It really forces a paradigm shift, doesn't it? We like to think of human morality as this fixed, immovable architecture.
Yeah, we assume our rules are just universal.
We do.
Yeah.
But an event like this asks us to look closely at the foundation of that architecture and realize how much of it is built on the assumption of a full stomach and a warm room.
Wow, yeah. So next time you feel a chill and put on a sweater or open your fridge because you're feeling a little peckish, I want you to keep this story in mind.
For sure.
How much of our morality is actually just a luxury of circumstance? What happens when you are forced to choose between the ultimate societal taboo and the sacred, primal duty to simply live?
It is a crucible, the ultimate test of the human spirit.
Let's start with the origin of the flight. Because the disaster, it doesn't begin with the crash. It begins with the plane.
Right, the aircraft itself.
Yeah. It's October 1972. The Old Christians Club, which is an amateur rugby union team from Montevideo, Uruguay, is chartering a flight to Santiago, Chile for a match.
A celebratory trip, basically.
Exactly. And they're flying on a Uruguayan Air Force Fairchild FH-2270. Now, going through the aviation history sources, I learned that pilots had a specific and frankly ominous nickname for this aircraft.
Oh, I know this one.
Yeah, they called it the lead sled.
The lid sled.
Yeah.
Right, which immediately tells you something about its capabilities or lack thereof.
Yeah, lead isn't exactly known for its aerodynamics.
Exactly. The moniker came from the fact that it was chronically underpowered. It was actually a stretched version of an older aircraft designed to hold more passengers and cargo.
Oh, I see. So they made it bigger.
Right, but they didn't upgrade the engines proportionally, so that extra weight made it incredibly sluggish.
That sounds dangerous.
It is. And when you are fully loaded and trying to climb over something as massive and unpredictable as the Andes Mountains, an underpowered aircraft is your worst nightmare.
And it was fully loaded, 40 passengers.
Mostly young guys, right?
Yeah, mostly these young rugby players in their late teens and early 20s, along with some friends and family members, plus 5 crew.
Okay.
So they take off on October 12th, but severe weather forces them to land in Mendoza, Argentina for the night.
Just a delay, they think.
Right. The next afternoon, Friday the 13th, the weather clears just enough, and they try again. The pilot, Colonel Ferradas, is highly experienced, but he's handing the controls over to his co-pilot, Lieutenant Colonel Dante Lagora, who is in training.
Okay, so a trainee's at the stick.
Yeah. Now, because of the lead sled's low-altitude ceiling, they can't fly directly over the highest peaks of the Andes. They literally can't get high enough.
Which is a huge problem.
So they have to take a U-shaped route south, fly through the Planchon Pass, and then turn north to descend into Chile.
And this is where the compounding variables of disaster really start to align. You have an underpowered aircraft, you have heavy cloud cover completely obscuring visual landmarks, and you have a co-pilot relying on dead reckoning.
Let's pause there, actually, because dead reckoning, it sounds like an antiquated pirate term.
It does sound like a pirate thing, yeah.
What exactly does that mean in the context of a 1970s commercial aircraft?
Dead reckoning is essentially flying blind, mathematically.
Hmm.
When you can't see the ground, and you obviously don't have modern GPS, you calculate your current position based on a previously known position.
Okay, so doing math in your head.
Well, on instruments, but yes.
Yeah.
You take your starting point, your compass heading, your indicated airspeed, and the time elapsed.
So if I know I passed a city 10 minutes ago and I'm flying at 300 miles an hour, I can calculate exactly where I should be right now.
Exactly. That's the theory. But there's a fatal flaw in dead reckoning, and that is wind.
When?
Yeah. Your indicated airspeed is how fast the plane is moving through the air around it. But if you have a massive headwind blowing against the front of the plane, your ground speed, like your actual progress over the Earth, is much slower.
Ah, I get it. And they had a massive headwind.
A severe headwind that Lagura just didn't fully account for. He thought he was traveling much faster over the ground than he actually was.
Oh, no.
So when he looked at his watch, his dead reckoning calculation told him he had reached the Curacao corridor.
Which is what?
That's the precise point where they were supposed to turn north and begin their descent out of the mountains and into the valleys of Chile.
So he thinks he's cleared the mountains. He radios Santiago Air Traffic Control and says, we've passed Curacao, requesting permission to descend.
But he is fatally wrong.
Yeah. Because of that headwind, they are still 60 to 70 kilometers east of Curacao. They aren't past the mountains at all. They are right in the heart of them.
And Santiago Control, which they had no radar coverage over that section of the Andes at the time. They have no way of verifying his actual position.
They just have to trust him.
They have to take his word for it. So they clear him to descend.
The plane drops into the clouds, and almost immediately they hit a severe downward air current.
The turbulence is violent. I mean, the plane drops hundreds of feet in seconds.
The ground collision alarm in the cockpit starts screaming. They break through the bottom of the cloud cover, and the passengers look out the windows to see a massive black mountain ridge rising dead ahead of them.
Just a wall of rock.
A wall. The pilots slam the throttles to maximum power, trying to force the lead sled to climb. They pull the nose up so hard the plane is nearly vertical, shaking violently as it nears a stall.
It's struggling so hard.
They actually manage to get the nose over the ridge, but the lower part of the plane clips the rock.
And the kinetic energy of what happens next is almost impossible to comprehend.
It's devastating. The right wing hits the mountain, splinters off, and is hurled backward. The sheer force of that impact cleanly severs the tail cone of the plane.
It just rips the back off.
In an instant, the entire back of the aircraft is just a gaping hole. 5 people, 2 crew members, and 3 passengers are sucked out into the freezing abyss immediately. A second later, another impact tears off the left wing. The fuselage, now essentially a wingless, tailless aluminum tube, hits the snow-covered slope of a glacier.
And this, right here, is the one microscopic piece of luck in this entire tragedy.
If you can call it luck.
Right, because it hits at that precise angle on a steep, snow-covered slope. It doesn't shatter into a million pieces against a flat rock face. It acts like a high-speed toboggan.
It slides down the glacier at roughly 220 miles per hour. It rockets down the slope until it finally rams into a massive, unyielding snowbank.
The stop is just brutal.
The deceleration is instantaneous. It's so abrupt that the passenger seats, which are bolted to the floor, rip completely free from their moorings.
Like they were nothing.
They are hurled forward, telescoping into each other, crushing the people sitting in them against the front bulkhead. The cockpit is crushed inward, killing the pilot instantly and pinning Lagura, the co-pilot, against the instrument panel.
It's just unimaginable force.
12 people are dead on impact or shortly after. Out of 45 people on board, there are 33 initial survivors.
We need to look closely at the psychology of that exact moment. Because These are privileged, wealthy young men. They go to prestigious Catholic schools. They have tight-knit
They
families.
were just singing a minute ago.
Exactly. They were just singing and throwing a rugby ball around on a festive sporting trip. And in the span of maybe 90 seconds, they are thrust into a landscape of absolute, unimaginable carnage.
The sensory overload must have been paralyzing. The overpowering smell of jet fuel, the howling of the freezing wind tearing through the open back of the plane, the screams of the injured, the sight of their dead friends.
Complete shock.
Think about it this way. Imagine playing a complex, structured game of chess in a warm room. Suddenly, the board catches fire, the pieces melt, the room drops to sub-zero temperatures, and you realize the new rules of the game require you to literally fight for your life.
That was a great analogy.
You would expect the human brain processing that instant paradigm shift to just shatter. You'd expect absolute panic, a descent into some Lord of the Flies chaos with people scrambling over each other for survival.
It's the natural assumption. We are conditioned by movies and literature and to believe that civilization is a thin veneer.
Yeah.
And underneath, we are all selfish savages just waiting for an excuse.
Right.
But reading through the accounts, that didn't happen here. They didn't fracture.
Why not? I mean, why didn't they immediately turn on each other in the panic?
Because of their pre-existing social architecture. The Lord of the Flies scenario assumes a group of strangers or individuals without an established, internalized order. But these weren't strangers.
They were a team.
They were a disciplined rugby team. They had an established hierarchy. They had a captain, Marcelo Perez. And in that moment of ultimate chaos, Perez immediately steps into his accustomed role.
He takes charge.
He doesn't freeze. He organizes the uninjured to clear debris, to free people trapped under the crushed seats, and to fashion a crude wall out of luggage to block the gaping hole in the back of the plane from the blizzard outside.
And it wasn't just Perez. You had two second-year medical students on board, Roberto Canessa and Gustavo Zerbino. They instantly shift into triage mode.
At 20 years old.
Yeah. And they are dealing with horrific combat-level trauma. We're talking exposed brains, metal pipes impaled through abdomens, compound fractures with bones sticking out of the skin.
It's a war zone.
And they are doing this with absolutely zero medical supplies. No painkillers, no bandages, no antiseptics. They're using torn shirts to splint broken bones.
That immediate emergence of order is miraculous, but it's also, it's a deeply ingrained psychological defense mechanism.
Also,
Marcelo Perez's leadership gave them a cognitive framework to survive the shock. It allowed them to operate under the assumption that the old rules still applied.
explain that. What do you mean by the old rules?
The logic was, we are a civilized team. We have had a tragic accident. We will organize ourselves, care for our wounded, and the authorities will come rescue us.
It's a comforting thought.
Right. It gave them a false but completely necessary sense of security in those first hours. It kept the crushing reality of their isolation at bay.
Right. They assumed rescue was a given. It was a commercial flight, after all. But as we move into the first agonizing week, that assumption begins to crack against the brutal reality of their environment.
The environment is relentless.
We are entering the starvation threshold. The mountain is actively, aggressively trying to kill them. At night, the temperatures drop to minus 30, sometimes minus 40 degrees Celsius.
And again, no winter coats.
Right. To keep from freezing to death in the dark, they huddle together in a mass of bodies, punching each other's arms and legs just to keep their blood circulating.
The isolation is profound. They are trapped in a deep caldera, surrounded by towering peaks, a place that would later be dubbed the Valley of Tears. They are entirely cut off from the visual world.
And they tried everything to signal the outside world. I mean, they tried to spell SOS with lipstick on the roof of the plane, but the letters were laughably small.
Yeah, you wouldn't see that from a plane.
Not at all. They made a massive X out of suitcases in the snow, hoping a plane would see it. But it was completely invisible to the search planes flying overhead because the white fuselage of the aircraft blended perfectly into the snow-covered glacier.
It's camouflage.
Planes literally flew right over them, and the survivors screamed and waved, but they were essentially ghosts.
And while they are fighting the cold, there is a much quieter, more insidious threat creeping in, which is the lack of calories.
The food situation was dire from minute one. For 33 people, they scoured the wreckage and found a terrifyingly small stockpile. 8 chocolate bars, a few jars of jam, a tin of mussels, some almonds, dates, and a little wine.
For over 30 people.
That's it. They rationed it to the extreme. Nando Parado, one of the survivors who actually suffered a severe skull fracture in the crash and was presumed dead for the first 3 days, he describes making a single chocolate-covered peanut last for 3 entire days.
That is just, wow.
He would take a tiny bite, let it dissolve, and wait hours before the next bite.
We really need to break down the biological reality of this, because at 11,500 feet, the human body's caloric demand is astronomical.
Why is it so much higher? Is it just because of the cold?
The cold is a massive factor. It's a process called cold thermogenesis. Your body's basal metabolic rate, which is the energy you burn just existing, skyrockets because your internal furnace is working overtime just to keep your vital organs from freezing.
So you're burning calories just trying to stay warm.
Huge amounts. You are burning 4,000 to 5,000 kilocalories a day just shivering. But add to that the hypoxia, the lack of oxygen at that altitude.
Right, the thin air.
Your heart is beating faster, your lungs are working harder, your body is an engine running at redline, and its fuel tank is completely empty.
So what actually happens inside the body when you are burning 5,000 calories a day and consuming practically zero?
Well, the body is ruthlessly efficient at keeping the brain and heart alive. First, it burns through your glycogen stores, which are the sugars in your liver and muscles. That takes about 24 to 48 hours.
Okay, so a couple of days.
Then it enters ketosis, metabolizing its own fat stores. But remember, these were young, athletic rugby players. They didn't have massive fat reserves.
They was lean.
Very lean. So very quickly, the body moves to the next phase, which is catabolism. It begins to consume its own muscle tissue.
It eats itself.
Literally.
Ah.
The body breaks down skeletal muscle into amino acids to keep the brain functioning. They were quite literally starving to death, experiencing the physical, aching agony of their bodies digesting their own muscles. They grew weaker by the hour.
The desperation becomes so intense that they try ripping open the airplane seats to eat the polyurethane upholstery foam.
Just for something in their stomachs.
Yeah, they try eating the leather from belts and luggage straps.
Which is incredibly dangerous.
Right, because the leather is treated with industrial chemicals. It just makes them violently ill, which dehydrates them further.
All the while, they are waiting for the rescue that Marcelo Perez keeps assuring them is just over the next peak. But then comes day 8.
Day 8 is the pivot point of the entire story. One of the survivors, Roy Harley, had been tinkering with a salvaged transistor radio. He couldn't transmit, but he finally gets it to pick up a faint signal from a station in Chile.
A lifeline.
They think it is. The survivors huddle around it, holding their breath, expecting to hear updates on the massive rescue effort underway. Instead, the announcer reads a bulletin stating that the search for Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571 has been officially called off. The authorities assume everyone is dead. They announce they will return in the summer, when the snow melts, to recover the bodies.
The psychological devastation of that moment is hard to overstate.
Imagine standing on a glacier. You are freezing. Your body is eating its own muscles. You are looking at a desolate, endless horizon of ice and rock, and you suddenly hear a voice on a radio casually state that the world has moved on.
It's over.
The world thinks you are a ghost. You are entirely, utterly alone.
The despair could have, and perhaps logically should have, destroyed them entirely. It should have in the moment they all just lay down in the snow and went to sleep.
It would be so easy to just give up.
Exactly. But this is where we see one of the most remarkable psychological cognitive reappraisals in recorded history. A survivor named Gustavo Nikolic, they called him Coco, hears this news. He looks at the others, who are weeping, and he reframes it.
What does he say?
He says, "This is good news, because we're going to get out of here on our own."
Good news. It's almost absurd. How can you possibly spin the cancellation of your own rescue as good news?
It sounds absurd, but from a psychological standpoint, it is brilliant. Nikolic forced to shift from a passive state to an active state.
Okay, unpack that.
As long as they believed rescue was coming, they were rescue expectant. They were victims waiting to be saved. The locus of control was external. It was up to the helicopters, the government, the outside world.
They didn't have to do anything but wait.
Right. But the moment the search was canceled, that illusion shattered. The locus of control shifted internally. They were now self-reliant agents. They had to take absolute ownership of their own survival.
But taking ownership of their survival brings us to the most harrowing crossroad of this entire story. When that newfound need for active survival meets the biological reality of starvation we just discussed, how does a group of deeply religious early 1970s Catholic young men even begin to contemplate the unthinkable?
They grapple with it agonizingly. By the 10th day, the meager rations, the chocolate, the jam are entirely gone. They are surrounded by rock and snow. There are no plants. There are no animals. The only source of viable, life-sustaining protein and fat available to them is the bodies of their dead friends and family members, preserved perfectly in the deep freeze of the snow outside the plane.
We are talking about survival anthropophagy, cannibalism.
Yes, and it is crucial to establish the ethical and categorical distinction here, which the ethical analyses from the Ethos Institute outline very clearly. We're talking about necro-cannibalism, consuming the flesh of someone who is already dead.
As opposed to what?
This is fundamentally different from homicidal cannibalism, which means killing someone in order to eat them.
So drawing straws or killing the weakest member, the classic lifeboat ethics scenario, that was never considered.
Never. Not once. That would have crossed a moral threshold into murder. Christian ethics, and indeed almost all global moral frameworks, fundamentally reject homicidal cannibalism because it violates the commandment against murder and the sanctity of human life.
Right.
But necro-cannibalism presents a deeply complex ethical gray area.
But even as a gray area, the cultural taboo is monumental. Our culture conditions us to view this act as the ultimate degradation. It is the sacred taboo.
Exactly. And these young men were devout. Their immediate fear was not just the physical revulsion, which was massive, but the spiritual consequence.
The fear of damnation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Roberto Canessa, the medical student, wrote about agonizing over this. He feared that by eating their friends, they would be stealing their souls. They wondered if they were turning into brute savages, losing the very humanity they were trying to save.
Look, I have to stop you there and push back on this a bit.
Sure.
I understand the desperation, but I'm reading about the theological framework they constructed to justify this. They drew direct parallels to the Last Supper and the Catholic Eucharist.
The body and blood of Christ, yes.
Right. The idea that Jesus gave his body and blood to his disciples so that they might have spiritual life. So they reasoned that if Jesus offered his body for salvation, their fallen friends would want their bodies to be used to sustain their physical lives.
That was the theological bridge.
Right. But part of me, and probably part of anyone listening, has to wonder, wasn't that just a highly convenient rationalization, a psychological loophole for people who were simply desperate not to die? Like, we want to eat, so let's make it holy.
It's a valid pushback. And honestly, it's the exact criticism they faced from some corners of the public after they were rescued. But if you look at the primary sources, the internal debates on that mountain prove it wasn't a flippant or convenient rationalization.
It wasn't just a quick excuse.
Not at all. It was a profound, agonizing theological struggle. Many of them vehemently rejected the idea initially. Cochite Inciarte and Numitricati refused to eat for days, choosing starvation over the violation of the taboo.
They'd rather die.
Yes. Liliana Mathal, the last surviving woman at the time, held out the longest due to her deep religious convictions. She only agreed when the Eucharist analogy was fully, deeply explained and debated among them. It wasn't a quick excuse, it was a desperately needed spiritual bridge over an impossible moral chasm.
And to cross that bridge, they did something unprecedented. They formed a communal pact.
Yes. This is perhaps the most ethically significant moment of the entire ordeal. Every single living member of the group gathered and made a solemn mutual agreement.
What was the agreement?
They stated, "If I die, the rest of you have my permission and my blessing to use my body to survive."
It's pre-mortem consent.
Precisely. And ethically, that transforms everything.
Yeah.
It shifts the act from one of desecration and theft to one of collective sacrifice, profound generosity, and love. It removes the violation.
But the mechanics of actually doing it, I mean, the mind can rationalize it, the theology can justify it, but the physical body still has to perform the act. How do you take that first step?
It fell to Roberto Canessa. He felt a duty as a medical student to preserve life. He knew the biology. He knew they were dying. The sources say he took a shard of broken windshield glass.
Glass, because they didn't have tools.
Right. He went out into the snow alone and cut a matchstick-sized piece of frozen flesh from one of the bodies. She brought it back, and he forced himself to swallow it. He said it had no taste because it was frozen solid, but the psychological barrier he had to push through to swallow it is just staggering.
And once he took that first step, others followed. Not easily. They gagged, they wept, they forced it down like medicine.
It was pure survival.
And there were still strict boundaries. Nano Prado's mother and sister had died in the crash. He protected their bodies, and the entire group honored that boundary. They didn't touch them.
That shows the humanity remained intact.
Yeah. But as the 72 days dragged on, the reality of starvation meant they eventually had to consume not just muscle, but organs and even brains to get the necessary calories and vitamins to stave off scurvy and malnutrition.
And this goes back to your earlier pushback about losing their humanity. Pablo Vierchi, who wrote the definitive account of the survivors, argues the exact opposite.
He thinks they became more human.
He calls the group that emerged a society of mercy, compassion, and generosity. By giving themselves to each other through that pact, they didn't descend into savagery. They elevated their humanity through the ultimate sacrifice.
Okay, so they cross the threshold. They find a way to sustain themselves nutritionally. The starvation clock is temporarily paused. You'd think, if this were a Hollywood script, that this is the turning point where things stabilize.
The climax of the first act, right?
They've paid the ultimate moral price, now they just have to wait for the thaw. But the mountain isn't done with them. The environment exploits their biggest vulnerability, which is their location.
They had established a fragile routine. They had a system.
Right. It's October 29th, day 17. They go to sleep in the fuselage. The makeshift wall of luggage is up to block the wind. And at midnight, Roy Harley happens to be awake, shifting positions.
Just a normal night.
Then he hears two terrifying, thundering roars echoing down the valley. And before anyone can even sit up, millions of tons of snow tear through the luggage wall.
An avalanche.
An avalanche buries the fuselage completely.
In a fraction of a second, the floor disappears.
Yeah.
They're trapped in a dark, freezing, snow-filled cube.
Roy Harley is buried up to his chest, but he manages to dig out the person next to him, and they frantically start digging others out with their frozen bare hands in pitch blackness.
Just panic in the dark.
But the snow is packed like concrete, and the physical horror of this is unimaginable. They are entombed alive for 3 days. The blizzard outside is raging, burying the plane under meters of snow. Nando Parado eventually finds a metal pole from the luggage racks and manages to poke a hole through the roof of the plane just so they don't suffocate from carbon dioxide poisoning.
And they are trapped in that dark, freezing space alongside the bodies of 8 more people who were killed instantly in the avalanche.
Including Liliana Muffle and Marcelo Perez, the rugby captain and their initial leader.
This is a vital sociological inflection point. The avalanche violently destroyed the last remnants of their ordinary world. Marcelo Perez represented the old hierarchy, the old rules, the connection to the world before the crash.
He was the one who kept saying rescue was coming.
Exactly.
Yeah.
With his death, that connection is completely severed. The old rules vanish entirely.
It's a crucible inside a crucible. Just when they thought they had adapted, the mountain literally buries them alive. How do you maintain cohesion in total darkness trapped with the dead, realizing you now have to harvest meat from your newly deceased friends because the bodies outside are lost under meters of snow?
It's enough to break anyone.
How do they not just descend into absolute madness right there in the dark?
This is where the psychological framework of Viktor Frankl becomes incredibly relevant. Frankl was a psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor who wrote Man's Search for Meaning. He developed logotherapy.
Give me the ELI-5 on logotherapy in this context. What does it mean?
So logotherapy argues that the primary motivation of human life is not pleasure or even just survival for its own sake, but the will to meaning. Frankl observed in the concentration camps that those who survived were often those who could find a meaning in their suffering, a why to live that allowed them to bear any how.
If your suffering has a purpose, it ceases to be just arbitrary torture. So what was their why? Because the why of just going back to playing rugby seems pretty hollow when you were buried alive in an icy tomb.
Their why became the collective survival of the group itself and the burning desire to return to the families they loved. After the avalanche, what emerged is known as the Society of the Snow.
A completely new structure.
Yes. It ceased to be a rugby team waiting for rescue. It became a true meritocracy of survival. Traditional status, wealth, or your position on the rugby field meant nothing. Work, discipline, and solidarity were the only metrics of value, and a new leadership structure emerged organically to replace Marcelo.
The Strouch cousins, Eduardo, Fido, and Daniel Fernandez.
Yes, they stepped into the void, and they did so by taking on the most psychologically devastating task, which was harvesting and rationing the meat.
Why them? Why did they take that on?
Because they were slightly older, more emotionally detached, and they recognized that if everyone had to carve the meat themselves, the psychological trauma would literally break the younger or more fragile survivors.
That makes sense.
By taking on this terrible burden, the Strouch cousins acted as a psychological buffer. They would dry the meat in the sun, ration it out, and shield the others from the brutal reality of what was sustaining them.
Protecting them from the horror of it.
Every action in this new society, every drop of melted water, every scrap of meat, was tied to the purpose of the group's survival. That shared meaning, that absolute reliance on each other, kept madness at bay.
Which brings us to the sheer, breathtaking ingenuity of this new society. Because survival wasn't just about managing psychology and food, it was about complex physical engineering. They are at 11,500 feet. They have to solve complex thermodynamic and physical problems with zero tools.
It's impromptu structuring. They repurposed the shattered wreckage of their past to mitigate the lethality of their present environment.
Let's talk about hydration. You were surrounded by snow. You'd think water wouldn't be an issue.
Water everywhere.
Right. But if you eat snow at that altitude, the metabolic cost of your body heating that frozen water to core temperature will cause your internal body temperature to plummet. You will literally freeze yourself from the inside out.
And you burn more calories melting the snow inside your body than you can afford to lose.
Exactly. So Fido Strauch creates a solar water melter. He rips the aluminum backing off the airplane seats. He bends the metal to form a shallow basin, angling it precisely to catch the intense, high-altitude UV rays of the sun.
Brilliant.
He sprinkles a thin layer of dark soil from the mountain on the metal to absorb more heat, puts a layer of snow on top, and lets the solar radiation melt it into drops of drinking water, catching it in empty wine bottles.
They also manufactured sunglasses.
Oh, right, for the glare.
Yeah, at that altitude, the glare of the sun off the glacier can burn your corneas in hours, causing snow blindness, which is excruciating and permanently debilitating. So they took the tinted plastic from the pilot's cabin sun visors, cut them into shapes, and sewed them to elastic bra straps, using copper wire they stripped from the plane's electrical system.
They stripped the woolen seat covers to use as blankets. They used hollowed-out rugby balls as overnight urinals so they wouldn't have to open the barricade and step outside into the deadly blizzards at night.
Ingenious, really.
But their absolute masterpiece of engineering was the sleeping bag.
That sleeping bag is the technological leap that makes the climax of this story possible.
Because they all knew that as summer approached in December, the deep freeze would end. The bodies they relied on for food would begin to decompose. Remaining at the crash site was a ticking clock.
They couldn't stay forever.
They had to walk out. But walking out meant surviving the nights on the open mountain where temperatures still dropped well below freezing.
You can't just huddle on the side of a mountain. You need insulation. But how do you make a sub-zero sleeping bag without tools, needles, or fabric?
They scavenged. They found the waterproof canvas fabric that covered the plane's air conditioning unit in the tail section. But canvas isn't insulation.
Right, it just blocks the wind.
So they tore apart the inner walls of the fuselage and pulled out the thick bats of fiberglass insulation. They sandwiched the fiberglass between layers of the waterproof canvas.
And then comes the hardest part, fastening it together.
Roy Harley and Carlitos Paez literally sewed it together. They extracted thin copper wire from the plane's electrical circuits. They used shards of sharp plastic and metal as needles, piercing the tough canvas and weaving the copper wire through.
Wow.
Imagine the sheer caloric cost, the agonizing pain of doing fine motor work like that with frozen, emaciated fingers day after day. But they built it, a large, 3-person sleeping bag.
And with that piece of technology, the Society of the Snow enacts its final desperate plan. They form the Expeditionaries.
The strongest among them, Nando Parado, Roberto Canessa, and Antonio Tintin Vizintin. The group enacts specific laws for these 3 men. They are entirely exempted from daily chores.
They needed to rest.
They are given the warmest clothes, pieced together from everyone's luggage. We're talking multiple sweaters, 3 pairs of jeans. And most importantly, they are given the largest rations of meat to build their strength for the climb.
The entire society invests its remaining energy, its remaining hopes, into these 3 men. They literally become the vessel for the group's salvation.
Day 61, December 12th. They set out. Now remember the pilot's dying words. He said they had passed Curacao. He said the green valleys of Chile were just past the western peaks.
Which we know was tragically false.
Right. So Parado, Canessa, and Vizintin start climbing the massive mountain immediately to the west of the crash site. It is a grueling, agonizing ascent. They are sinking to their hips in the snow. They are gasping for oxygen in the thin air.
And they are so weak.
It takes them 3 full days to reach the summit. It is a 15,000-foot peak. Parado pushes ahead. He is the first to reach the top. He looks over the edge, fully expecting to see the green, lush valleys of Chile rolling out before him.
And what does he actually see?
He sees mountains, endless, jagged, snow-capped mountains stretching out in every direction all the way to the horizon. They aren't in Chile. They are deep, deep in the Argentine Andes. They are nowhere near the edge.
Try to fathom the crushing, suffocating weight of that realization. They had just spent 3 days climbing a 15,000-foot mountain on a diet of human flesh, only to look out at a landscape of certain death.
Nando looks at Canessa when he reaches the peak and he says, "We thought we were 5 kilometers away. We were 80.
80 kilometers of mountains.
But this is where the psychological shift we talked about earlier reaches its absolute apex. Nando looks out at the endless peaks and he tells Canessa, "If I die, nothing matters. I am already dead. So if you're still breathing, that's a bonus."
Incredible.
He realizes that he is a dead man walking. And by crossing the invisible gates of death in his own mind, he is completely, utterly freed from fear.
It's a profound existential liberation. When you accept that you are already dead, the mountain can't threaten you anymore. And this liberation is driven by the most powerful motivator there is, which is love.
Right.
Frankl wrote that love is the ultimate and highest goal to which man can aspire. Nando's driving force wasn't just biology. It was an absolute, burning desire to return to his father. His mother and sister had died in the crash. He couldn't bear the thought of his father losing his entire family.
That's powerful.
That love propelled him forward when his biology should have failed.
They make a brutal, tactical decision on that peak. They realize the journey will take weeks, not days. They don't have enough food, so they send Vizintin back down to the fuselage so that Parado and Canessa can take his food rations.
That makes sense. Conserve resources.
Vizintin leaves his meat, uses a makeshift sled made from an airplane seat cushion, and slides all the way back down to the fuselage in a single hour, a distance that took them 3 agonizing days to climb.
Wow.
Parado and Canessa push forward into the unknown. For 10 grueling days, they walk. They hike down the mountainside, their bodies emaciated, their shoes falling apart, sustained only by the strips of meat wrapped in their homemade sleeping bag. Eventually, miraculously, the snow gives way to rocks.
Changing terrain.
The rocks give way to sparse vegetation, and finally, they reach a rushing, roaring river in a valley.
The transition from the stark white world of the dead back to the vibrant green world of the living.
On the 9th day of their trek, exhausted to the point of collapse, Canessa thinks he is hallucinating. Across the rushing river, he sees a man on horseback. It's a Chilean muleteer named Sergio Catalan.
A real person.
The roar of the river is too loud for them to yell across. Catalan gestures that he will return the next day. The next morning, Catalan is there. He wraps a piece of paper and a pencil around a rock and throws it across the rushing water to them.
The absurdity of this moment is striking. 2 completely different worlds colliding. A man tending his livestock, throwing a rock to 2 emaciated ghosts who have just conquered the Andes.
Nando Parado takes the pencil with shaking hands. And the note he writes, it is a masterclass in desperate clarity. He writes, "I come from a plane that fell in the mountains.
Straight to the point.
I am Uruguayan. We have been walking for 10 days. I have an injured friend up there. There are 14 people injured in the plane.
Giving all the crucial fact.
We have to get out of here fast. We don't know how. We have no food. We are weak. When are you going to come and get us? Please, we can't even walk. Where are we?"
Got that last question. Where are we?
He throws the rock back. Catalan reads it. His eyes go wide. He throws them a piece of bread across the river and rides for 10 hours straight to the nearest police outpost to alert the military.
How do you quantify that level of will? You can't. It transcends biology. It is the human spirit manifesting as a physical force that refused to be extinguished.
And that brings us to the final chapter of our deep dive, the rescue and the return. On December 22nd and 23rd, military helicopters finally break through the treacherous mountain passes, guided by Parado. They arrive at the crash site.
I can't imagine what the rescuers thought.
The rescuers are stunned. They expected to find a graveyard. Instead, they find 14 surviving men standing amidst the wreckage, waving frantically. After 72 days, 16 men in total are brought back from the dead.
But the ordeal wasn't entirely over. The Society of the Snow now had to collide with the other society. The ordinary world they had left behind, a world that had not experienced their crucible.
Initially, the media celebrated it as the miracle of the Andes. It was a global sensation. But the survivors had made a pact on the mountain to keep their method of survival a secret, to explain it privately to the families of the deceased first.
Which is very respectful.
However, rumors leaked. A rescue photograph showing a half-eaten human leg in the snow near the fuselage made the front page of Chilean newspapers. And the global reaction was immediate shock, horror, and immense backlash.
Society, sitting in the comfort of its living rooms, tried to apply ordinary sea-level morality to an extraordinary high-altitude situation. They judged the survivors based on the luxury of full stomachs and warm beds.
The survivors realized they couldn't hide behind a PR strategy. On December 28th, they held a press conference at Stella Maris College in Montevideo, and they bravely, unflinchingly owned their truth.
They faced it head-on.
Alfredo Delgado spoke for the group, and he explained their theological reasoning. He compared their actions to the Last Supper, calling it an intimate communion that helped them survive. He asked the public not to misunderstand or twist their profound sacrifice.
And remarkably, it worked. The transparency, the sheer vulnerability of their explanation shifted public perception. The Catholic Church officially absolved them, with theologians stating that a person is permitted to eat dead human flesh if there is no feasible alternative for survival.
It proved that moral rigidity must sometimes yield to the absolute sanctity of life.
Exactly.
Before we close, the sources note a really sobering modern ecological fact. Today, if Flight 571 crashed in that exact same spot, the physical mechanics of the story would be drastically different.
How so?
Due to climate change, the glacier where they crashed, the Glacier of Tears, has 12% less snow per decade. During the summer now, the area is completely devoid of snow. The harsh, deep freeze that preserved the bodies and arguably provided their only source of water is disappearing.
It adds a strange epilogue to the story. The mountain itself is changing, but the legacy of the men remains. Nando Parado, Roberto Canessa, Eduardo Strauch, they didn't just survive, they thrived.
They really did.
Canessa became a prominent pediatric cardiologist, fighting for the lives of children with the same intensity he fought for his own. Parado became a successful businessman and speaker, and as a group, they established Foundation Vivan, becoming massive advocates for organ donation.
Which is a beautiful, poetic continuation of the pact they made on the ice.
It really is. They lived their lives as a vibrant testament to the friends who didn't come back.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to carry with you today. We build our entire lives on a foundation of laws, ethics, and social norms. We assume they are permanent, that they are the bedrock of who we are.
We take it for granted.
We do. But the Society of the Snow proves that morality is adaptable. It is a structure we build to suit our environment. If you were stripped of absolutely everything, your warmth, your food, your contact with the world, forced into a broken tin can in a deep freeze, what parts of your rigid moral code would you sacrifice to survive? And what profound hidden strengths might you discover in the darkest, coldest valley on Earth?